discover my wife's 4-year affair with a recently deceased man. She admits cheating out of boredom and now wants to come back to me. I, 40M, and my wife, 39F, have been wed for 17 years. We have 3 kids, ages 13, 15, and 11, who were high school sweethearts. Dated for roughly 23 years at this point. This is the extent of my knowledge, but it's all I have. 3 days ago, the wife arrived home from work. On the 4th, I had to work. Emotional and frantic, she hurriedly packed an overnight bag and headed off. Only found out about this since our eldest daughter was watching her when she was at home. When I tried to communicate with her, she was just crying and acting upset and didn't say anything. Claimed to be on the verge of panic. We've texted her several times, but she doesn't reply. After immediately getting in touch with her parents, they eventually replied, stating, "My wife is safe with them. Please be patient and understanding." And that's it. I made an effort to get in touch with her brother, sister, and a close colleague. Her brother denied any knowledge, and a coworker claimed she was gone by lunch 3 days earlier after arriving at work in the morning. All she knew was that. And that's it. It's been 3 days. My wife is not in contact. Not even with the children present. Nothing. Nobody is communicating with us. Here I am, attempting to get by without her while raising my 3 daughters. Children are always asking me what's going on, inquiring about the status of mom. All I can say is that we should be understanding and patient, because she is a grandma and a grandfather. I feel a strong impulse to quickly gather the kids and head over there without any prior planning. It's only 3 hours away, and it's terrible to be stuck here in uncertainty. The children believe we are divorcing after a big argument, but that couldn't be further from the truth. We never argue. The children are aware of this. I'm not sure what's going on, but while I'm trying to handle everything without her, my current emotional condition has me thinking in circles. Could someone perhaps offer some clarification from a rational standpoint? Wouldn't your spouse's family be the first to know if someone passed away? Perhaps some old trauma was resurrected? But once more, my wife would be the first person I would turn to for help. We have no knowledge. Nothing is comprehensible. I have no idea what to do, and the girls and I just sit here in limbo. Nobody is educating us, and none of us knows anything. And I'm feeling anxious, afraid, furious, and everything else that one might possibly feel in this kind of circumstance. Is there anyone who can think of something reasonable? Why would you act in such a way as to ghost your family? First update. I haven't spent much time on Reddit yet. I'm sorry. Not much worth posting. I have no idea how to connect to my previous post, just unsure on the exact steps to take. Last night was a long one. Please accept my apology for the little update. I didn't sleep. I read every message yesterday and into the night, and I will finally read the comments today, so don't expect me to spend a lot of time on the computer today. I'll just share my knowledge and stop there. I eventually called the police yesterday night when my father-in-law failed to return my calls, and they conducted a wellness check, as many of you mentioned. I won't go into the maelstrom of problems this produced, but my wife has been having an affair for at least 2 years, if not more. Everyone was right. It seems that the other man suffered a heart attack on Tuesday and died that evening. Definitely. My spouse's mother-in-law. Furthermore, it seems likely that my sister-in-law has been stepping in for her, having knowledge of the situation. My wife hasn't gotten back to me yet. Not to the females, not to me. For now, trying to hide this from them. To be honest, I have no idea what to do next. All I know is that. And that's nearly enough to spell my doom. I appreciate your assistance and guidance. That's it. I'm not sure how to deal with this news. Please offer up a prayer for me in this update if you do. A couple people have suggested this subscription to me. I recently joined and have spent my free time reading a lot of posts. Primarily at night after the day's turmoil has subsided. Naturally, the brain then takes over and I have these depressive episodes. Then a lightning-fast rage comes over me. Then both simultaneously. It is almost impossible to sleep. After that, I go around all day like a zombie. My goal is to become familiar with every acronym. I suppose Friday was my D-Day. The wife and the man she cheated on with AP were people she had been seeing for a time. And although at first I assumed their relationship would last only 2 years, it seemed likely to have lasted longer. The disclosure came after his untimely death from a heart attack. I'm continuing research with my oldest daughter's assistance. I have a lot of stuff I'm not quite ready to post. I honestly had no intention of keeping up my posts regarding my predicament. But so much assistance and guidance has been provided by so many people. It's almost therapeutic now. Knowing that so many other individuals experience this kind of pain stings. I apologize so much about it. Yesterday and today, I had meetings with 2 different attorneys to go over my alternatives. Made multiple contacts regarding the second therapy. However, trying to follow many of the recommendations offered by others has resulted in extremely long waits where I reside. Avoid booze, but I never exercise. Take care of myself or anything else. I think I'm in pretty excellent shape for my age, but I'm having trouble finding the motivation to work out at the moment. I'm sure a lot of you will want further information. Please be aware that I'm not yet ready to discuss the who, what, when, why, and other details. It feels like a bomb goes off every day, and I just need help on one thing to maybe start sleeping a little. To me, my wife was everything. My closest pal from high school. The lady who gave birth to my 3 lovely daughters. We even have secret handshakes and inside jokes. Everything is lost. Everything. It's simply all vanished. I reflect on all of our years spent together. Every accomplishment. Every giggle. And now I just start to feel really down. It is debilitating. She acts as though none of it mattered. And now she will not be in my future. Subsequently, naturally, the question of how I could utilize it arises, and I am overcome with an insatiable burning wrath. I pound the mattress till my arms hurt and scream into my pillow. This cycle is terrible. I only go to bed when I'm really tired. The mind games will then start over when I suddenly wake up. I give my ladies, who have been trying to take care of me like they're my parents, all of my energy. It isn't just to them. When you all learned of the affair, how did you all sleep? How did you handle the empty space and quiet at night when all you had to do was think? I've determined that my daughter's sleep has to be my top concern in this whole situation. I really can't though. Thus, I'm hoping you can assist. I'm grateful to everyone. 3 updates. I apologize for my lack of experience on Reddit. I'm not sure how much of my circumstances I should clarify or restate, but it has been a little more than a week since my D-Day and more than 4 years since the day I discovered my wife had an affair. No precise time frame yet. It most likely began emotionally before becoming bodily. How the pandemic and lockdowns affected this intrigues me. I might or might not know the answers to these 2 questions. Nevertheless, my in-laws dropped by unexpectedly yesterday to see their grandchildren, and have been sleeping over at their place since the start of this nightmare, which is absurd. Naturally, they took a full 15 minutes to greet the females. My spouse and I had 3 daughters before she requested a private conversation with me. As you can think, the chat was lengthy and I don't want to go into detail about it all in this piece. To cut a long story short though, my wife wants to return home but is scared of the consequences of her acts and wants to avoid confronting her past. Her parents also put a lot of effort into trying to find out if I intended to file for divorce, and took a long time to attempt to convince me to forgive my wife and try to mend our marriage. They were obviously very humiliated and ashamed, and it was also obvious that they wanted my wife to leave their home. The conversation was quite polite and considerate. I feel like if I tell them I'm planning to get a divorce, my wife won't tell the truth, so I lied to them and said I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I want her to sit in front of me and explain everything, even though I might never understand. After more than 17 years of marriage, dating since high school, 3 children, many memories, and everything we've shared, she needs to give me her whole attention and tell me everything. Additionally, I want my children to know that I gave her the benefit of the doubt, allowed her to own up to her mistakes, and allowed us to resolve the situation as responsible adults. I'm constantly trying to decide which course will provide my children with the best example. Maybe I'm doing things incorrectly, I'm not sure. I am unable to legally keep my wife out of our house. The attorney made that extremely apparent. I therefore have no power to prohibit my wife from returning home. But at this moment I most definitely do not want this. I made a demand that I thought would be impossible to fulfill for a while because my daughters and I had actually begun to fall into a lovely pattern. I said my wife could come home, provided she first sat down with me face to face, opened up to me about her affair, and began to answer all of my questions without holding back or using more deception. She could then sit down with the girls and apologize in person, answering their questions as well. I reasoned that it's only fair since they already know. Once more, she is under no obligation to comply with any demands and is free to return home anytime she pleases. However, perhaps I could turn her fear of us to our benefit if she is terrified to face us. Is that incorrect? Here, I'm not attempting to be cunning or dishonest. I just really don't want to move in together just yet if I can postpone it. In our jurisdiction, a mandated 90-day waiting time must pass before a divorce may be finalized. It is inevitable that she will return home. Eventually, both of us will have to return to work, and life will continue despite this disaster. All I want to do is extend it to give myself more time to prepare and improve my emotional and mental well-being. In texts with the daughters, my wife says she doesn't want a divorce and apologizes to them over and over. The reality of what she's done to all of us is hitting her hard, especially in the last couple of days. They've shown me the texts and asked about me every day. How am I going to handle this? Was I being silly to demand this? In any case, it seems like my wife will be returning home shortly. Right now, I'm confident in my course of action. This doesn't scare me because I expected it to happen eventually. As we proceed, all I want to do is choose what's best for my girls and subsequently myself. We are grateful to everyone who has offered support, guidance, and encouragement. Fourth update. I apologize for the length of this, but it will be quite anticlimactic. All I have to do is finish this. I had a horrible weekend, but yesterday my wife returned home. There was a good bit of build-up during the week. I used to give her a hug and a kiss when she first came through the threshold, but this time there was just this really awkward tension between us. Before saying anything, she really approached me and attempted to give me an embrace, but I turned away. Amazing, as though nothing had occurred. She repeatedly stated that she wasn't ready when I asked her to tell me everything once she had calmed down. Earlier in the week we had spoken over the phone. Same outcome. She only repeated that she wasn't ready for that when I stressed that the only need for her to move back home was that she loved the family enough to give an explanation for her absence of almost 3 weeks. It was everything I could do not to yell at her, but I took a few deep breaths and tried to gather my thoughts. I was unsuccessful, and after the first of many protracted silences, I just blurted out that I wanted a divorce, and that she had been having an affair with her coworker for more than 4 years, that she had planned to leave me for this other man, that she had ghosted her entire family, and that she was now walking through the door without complying with a single request I had made. This is probably when things started to go strange. It was clear from her facial expression and body language. She had no idea how much of her affair I was aware of. She gave me a wide-eyed look before remaining motionless and stoic in the kitchen as she stared at the floor. I was prepared for anything, cut everything else from this, perhaps an emotional outburst, perhaps a confession through tears, perhaps she would lash out at me, accusing me of being involved in the affair, perhaps in a somber tone. All right, let's have a seat and discuss this, but not this response. We must have stood in complete quiet in the kitchen for 5 minutes. It was simply the most bizarre thing I had ever encountered. She was obviously at a loss for words, and I was too. I had read all of your advice and comments on my predicament. Even so, I made notes. I had braced myself for every possibility this conversation may bring, save this one, as I sat in front of a mirror. I finally made the decision to document everything I knew about her affair then and then. I might have been foolish to tell her everything I know. She just gazed at the floor the entire time, and I admit to making up my own ideas about a number of things, including how she met AP, her sister's involvement, what happened during COVID, etc. She said I did nothing, but I tried everything not to yell or act indecently. So as I went along, my rage grew. At last, I managed to gather my thoughts. There was another long, awkward silence after that. Then, after realizing everything, grief replaced fury. Then I gently questioned her, asking how I had pushed her away. Has she ever shown me love? Was he content too? Worth it? She remained silent, remained motionless. Simply nothing at all from her. No apologies or tears. No shouting, no justification. Only stood there, lowering her head. Nothing. This was painful. This was painful. Perhaps even worse than D-Day. I just kept looking at her. Although I'm not sure if I would have moved, things worsened. Our girls, of course, were listening in on the whole conversation. I'm simply so very, very foolish. Over the past few weeks, I've been devoting a lot of attention to prioritizing them and their needs. However, I became overly emotional and stopped worrying about their locations. I once went up against my wife. Our eldest daughter became enraged and stormed downstairs. She had a great deal of repressed rage. My spouse hastily dashed upstairs and shut the bedroom door. That's our current situation. Last night, I listened to my wife weep for most of the night before I went to sleep. Talking to her has only been attempted by our youngest. She's been avoided by the rest of us. I'm going to propose that she stay with her sister until we can complete the divorce if I can muster the bravery. However, she still calls this home. If we all have to live with her, it's going to be a dreadful situation. On my wife, I was mistaken. And you were all right. Regarding all of our years together, I was mistaken. False regarding every memory. The moments that alter a person's life. She really did fall to her knees and ask for forgiveness. I was sure of it. I had a strong belief that she would confess all of her transgressions over the previous 4 years and clear her name. Once, when one woman realized she had been handed $10 more in change than she needed, she literally drove back to a farmer's market since they didn't seem worth it to her. For her, I'm not worth it. Perhaps I never was. What happens next? It was really unpleasant at home today. I attempted, together with the girls, to continue as we had for the previous 2 weeks, but that's plainly not viable. I simply want to skip all of this and go straight to the people who have had to cohabitate with their oars, past the divorce, the difficult chats, the inevitable disputes, the fights, and the drama. How did you accomplish that? Particularly when it comes to children. I am aware that this is only the start. I keep seeing posts from people saying that things will get better, but I'm a long way from that. Right now, there's not a single second that goes by that I don't want to scream and slash SOB. Of course, I'm making a very, very big effort to keep my cool with the girls, but I'm not sure if I can manage it for 3 months. Before all of this is done, school will begin. This is my life, I suppose. I appreciate everyone's strong interest in me. I'm not sure if the worst is over or just around the corner, but I would appreciate whatever you can do to help me get through this next stage. Since I returned home and found out about her affair, I've been in a dark place. I have been doing my best to pretend for my daughters. I make an effort to think and speak the appropriate things. But since many of you post every day, I have to be honest with you tonight. It arrives in waves. However, I had a major one tonight and somewhat lost my cool. My WW has filed for divorce, but she hasn't yet hired an attorney. And once more, I'm attempting to be as understanding and patient as I can be in this situation. I'm beginning to feel hopeful for an amicable divorce that we manage primarily together. However, after tonight, who knows? She works fairly close to our family home, so on Friday nights, she travels to her sister's and returns home on Sundays. During the week, we live together. However, in the absence of traffic, her sister is an hour distant. This cycle of largely avoidance has been going on for the past few weeks. While the daughters and I attempt to go about our daily lives, she kind of keeps to herself. Despite the fact that there are informal exchanges every evening, my aunt and my eldest daughter only spoke after a few heated arguments. For now, it's best that way. I've been using a lot of your advice and the stuff I've read lately. I put a lot of effort into maintaining my self-control around my wife. And even though it requires all of my strength and willpower, I've always been kind and respectful, but short and uninterested in our little conversations. Up till this evening. She's been getting home from work on Fridays, getting a few things together and leaving for her sister's weekend before I even get home from work the past couple of times. However, not this evening. When I got home tonight, she was waiting for me in the kitchen. She gently grasped my hand and asked if I was going to treat her this way because she wasn't ready to talk to me about her affair. I tried to just go by, which, incidentally, is the first time she has spoken publicly about her infidelity since everything went viral over a month ago. I made an effort. I swear I tried to just bite my tongue and get over it, but our daughters weren't home, so I became angry. I then released all of my tension, hurt, ache, fury, and misery. I spilled my guts to her. I'm not even sure how long I continued. Lost all sense of time. I did occasionally speak up, become a bit boisterous and animated. I simply sobbed and told her how miserable I am and how shattered I am every day. All of the stuff I've been keeping hidden. Everything that has been causing me pain. If I tried to retell what I said, this post would be 4,000 words long. Once I got underway, there was no stopping me. Naturally, I started crying, became sentimental once more. After it, I was so damn mad at myself. Damn it, I've been doing so great. She managed to touch me. I let her influence me. It was inevitable, I knew. I was aware of it, revolting. I've been holding it within for a while, and I can only release so much in the weight room. Additionally, this was the first time you had truly become upset and broke down. Unexpectedly, I began to cry uncontrollably. Unfortunately, it pleased me to see that she was experiencing the same pain that I was. It was satisfying to see her crumble, even though I wish I didn't care. At last, it seems as though someone with even the slightest hint of empathy is present. Surprisingly, she apologized multiple times while I was exploding. She was crying sort of ugly, and all she could say was, "I'm so sorry." Nevertheless, I eventually left the kitchen before she could gather herself enough to say anything else. I begged her to leave me alone. That is what transpired. She spent some time in the kitchen before heading back to her sister's house. After a half hour or so, the girls arrived home and realized something had happened. I was not prepared to talk about anything, hard as it was to hide. And they don't think this is something they need to know about? My oldest would only get angrier if I told her about it, and I don't want to impede the improvement of my two youngest children who have been doing much better. I detest this. I detest it so much. I ought to have kept my composure. It would have been better if I had just ignored you and ignored her. Right now, I'm not sure. Looking back, it seems like she was merely attempting to strike up a conversation about her affair, but she was unsure of how to proceed, and evidently failed because I lost it. Now, I genuinely worry about her. I'm aware that a lot of people will condemn me for doing this, but I don't want anything bad to happen to her. Almost everyone has ignored her, leaving her alone and alone with her thoughts. It's true that you can claim she deserves it. Nevertheless, she is still my children's mother and a human being. How disappointing for me. I'm very disappointed in myself. I apologize for the lengthy diatribe. I rant to my brother over the phone. To the human. On Monday, I'll try to get back to it. I'm only a human. I had a fantastic feeling after venting to her. Naturally, though, regret is starting to set in. Is it better to text my wife or to ignore her? I'm a complete wreck. However, I appreciate you listening. I appreciate you giving me the help I need to get through this. And in the middle of the confusion, I appreciate all of your counsel. Well, at least we've all begun therapy. But this is really difficult. Very difficult. Update 6. I'm aware that a lot of you have been in touch with me, and I really value your concern. The majority of you were right. Not everything is going well, and I haven't had time to get onto the internet. I had intended to take a vacation from the internet, but I've been terribly remiss this week. It's simply been terrible. This week, my wife hasn't really left me alone. Too kind and quick to offer an apology for her liaison. Crying. Then suffocating me. Pounding at my door late at night. I want to communicate. I've occasionally ignored her, but I've also spoken when I felt like it. Finally, on Wednesday night, I lost my temper and told her to get away. Then, only last night, it happened that my soon-to-be ex-wife returned home following the explosion of her affair, just over a month earlier. And now that we've settled into this awkward cohabiting routine, she asked to have a private conversation with me in my room after the girls went to bed. Not like the way she'd been contacting me all week. Initially, I resisted it, but in the end, we went to the garage and took a seat in my car to avoid making the same error of confronting the youngsters in public. Sorry for the long apology. She told me everything that she thought was true. We spent nearly 3 hours outside. I'm not sure how much to divulge. I spent the entire night awake. Spent several hours listening to her cry once more, unable to get any sleep. I also shed tears. Then, when I became really upset, I had to stop myself from screaming at her before starting to cry. Anger followed, and so forth. Please be kind if it takes me a day or so to reply to everyone. I need to try to get this off my chest before going to bed. Getting my way, apologizing all the time, and pleading with me for another opportunity tonight hasn't helped either. Had to leave her alone for a couple of hours. In any case, being around her hurts so much. She was introduced to her AP by her sister approximately 5 years prior to COVID, ostensibly with no romantic ambitions. However, he provided her with an insider's account at a corporation she aspired to work for, and presently does. Thus, her decision to switch careers had nothing to do with her affair, but she clearly had more motivation once she changed jobs. After she was hired, AP started making out with her, began as messaging, then moved on to images and more. Then, shortly before COVID struck, texting turned violent. She wanted to tell me the truth at that time after confessing to her sister, but she chose to keep it to herself and say nothing. Wife claimed that shortly after going NC with her AP, he reconnected with her when lockdowns and limitations were released, and she continued their conversation until the physical element of the relationship resurfaced when companies began operations. She says she ended the affair once or twice out of remorse, but she kept going back to him, so in reality it never ended. She read out the entire account while fielding questions along the way. She had a 5-page packet of handwritten notes detailing the timing of her affair. About her weekend trips with the girls, she had lied. Regarding her business travels, she lied. As I suspected, she had lied to me about shopping trips, problems with her parents, traffic delays, and other things. And there was a long list, so many falsehoods I just decided to believe her. Nothing was ever questioned by a single word. However, they were just in front of me and he could hear everything. It only made my condition worse. That's all true, yet her devotion for him never truly wavered. While this whole thing was happening, she never became aloof, as I frequently read. Though not enough for me to notice warning signs, intimacy did shift. In any case, she acknowledges that she fell in love with AP and desired a life together. He was older, divorced, and unmarried, and he promised her ostentatious gifts, lavish vacations, and everything he could possibly want. She began to fantasize about avoiding her duties to the family, and insisted that the excitement of being with him was too great to ignore. Discussed how bored she was with her family's regular schedule. She came across as quite emotional, open, and sincere. Halfway through, I started bawling and lost my composure. As expected, hearing it all stung. Naturally, after confiding in me, she told me how much she loved me and always would, and that she would stop at nothing to keep the marriage together. Many of you had anticipated this, but I find everything to be so phony, as if it were staged. We've been together for more than half of my life, and I can tell when she's lying. Perhaps I'm not correct. I suppose it is irrelevant, but compared to the previous week I was more composed. Still became enraged and said a few crude things, such as making fun of her AP for seeing more than one woman, and said she was just one of many that he was prepared to brush off. She seemed to be very offended by that. When I consider this moment when she would finally admit to all the one-liners I could throw at her, or anything I could say to hurt her back, a million thoughts have gone through my head. There were hundreds of answers that I was unable to think of the other night during the emotional moment. However, there was one question I knew I would ask. If AP were still alive and had to pick between me and him, who would she choose? That's not fair, she muttered after hesitating. She finally responded that she would definitely choose me when I pressed the matter. I replied that I was divorcing her because of her reluctance, because once again she was lying. That was the last thing she said before breaking down in tears. We spent some time in the automobile. She didn't stop crying, but I was worn out. I recently informed her that we are divorcing and that it is our duty to treat the girls with respect, to be excellent parents, and to be involved in their life. I also said that I hoped she was a decent enough person to get a pretty amicable divorce given all the suffering she caused me. That would demonstrate her true affection for me. I told her I stole from somewhere online as my final statement to her. Please realize that I'm not a small-minded person, and that I didn't mean to hurt her. Everything seemed to come to a perfect conclusion. However, I meant all I said and did. I reached down to give her a quick kiss on the forehead, and assured her that I would always adore her. After exiting the vehicle, they went to bed. And that was all. Naturally, I didn't get any sleep the night before, and now I'm having trouble falling asleep again. I'm not sure what will happen next. I suppose one positive thing is that she has had the chance to oppose the divorce. However, I haven't yet spoken with my attorney. I find myself crying once more and reverting to my angry, depressed moments. Even though I could have done without it entirely, it was really difficult to hear everything last night. Now that I know she might have made it all up. Who knows? And lied. However, it appeared to go well with everything I assembled throughout the previous month. That's all for now then. It seems like this never ends. Some days are good for me. Regain your strength and then something else occurs. Although it seems like only a few days, it feels like months have passed. I will attempt to get some rest though. Envision the one you truly love. You've only ever loved and kissed one woman. Claims that she cheated on you for more than 4 years due to boredom. Did not lose their affection. Didn't split apart. Neither a dead bedroom nor relationship problems existed. Not at all like that. Merely out of boredom. I'm not sure if that makes things better or worse. I appreciate your support and reading along the journey. A terrible 2 nights. Really awful.
Now start second story.
Discovered my wife cheated for a year with an 18-year younger colleague. Then, I pretended to have an affair to gather evidence. On Christmas Eve, I left the divorce papers and all the evidence for her. Tricked my soon-to-be ex-wife, who was a cheater, into believing that I was. Next up was thermonuclear Chernobyl. Fed her on Christmas Day and ghosted her. We go way back, my soon-to-be ex-wife and I. When we first started dating, we were both 17 years old in 1992. Yes, we were the lovebirds of high school. I've only ever dated her once in my entire life, which, when you think about it, is very crazy. We were married at the age of 22 right after we both graduated from college. We'd been together for 5 years, so it felt appropriate. Then, almost a year after our marriage, we welcomed a boy into the world. Another boy came after a few years. We were a family of 4. There we were. I put in a ton of work over the 23 years we were together. I constructed a home for us. Made an effort to satisfy her every want. You are aware of the life she envisioned. We had our ups and downs, our difficult times, just like any marriage does. However, we were always able to overcome them, even in the most difficult circumstances. We would manage to resolve the issue and emerge from it stronger. However, after that, everything was different. Let's fast forward until March 2020. I began to sense that something wasn't quite right at that time. We were going through a difficult time, a true depression, and it had been for a few months. To exacerbate matters, I was still healing from a knee replacement. I had to get reconstructive surgery since I had severe knee pain. My knee was giving me trouble. I could not move or accomplish much because my range of motion was just approximately 55%. Everything at home suffered as a result of being stuck like that. Because I couldn't do much around the house and was on workers' compensation since the injury occurred at work, I spent a lot of time at home. We had a lot of jobs that were usually my forte, but with my knee acting up like this, I was unable to perform them, therefore our house got dirty. While our sons pitched in when they could, there were some tasks that I was just particularly good at. That work just kept piling up, or my spouse had to deal with them. I can assure you that she was not pleased with that. That was a significant change for her because she wasn't used to doing those tasks. Our already tense relationship became much more stressful as a result of this circumstance. In the bedroom, too, things came to a halt between us. Before my injury, it had already started to slow down, but in my condition at the moment, it came to a total stop. She was spending more time after work socializing with co-workers throughout these months, November 2019 through March 2020. For her, it was an everyday occurrence. I didn't give it any thought, of course. In the 23 years that I've known her, I've never had any cause for concern or mistrust. We have mutual pals. She has hers and I have mine. There have never been any problems when I go hang out with my pals. Everything was done legally. I became aware of something strange in January of this year. Sue began to act quite aloof toward me. Although we were going through a rough patch, she never stopped showing me love till then. She stopped giving me the regular hugs and kisses, even before my suspicions began to surface. She would constantly display and discuss with me everything she found online thanks to her phone being glued to her hand. Pinterest has recipes and do-it-yourself ideas, memes, everything. Now, though, she was being circumspect about her phone. She even started acting snippy around me as if she didn't want to be bothered. Therefore, it is now March. COVID has reached New York City, which is under lockdown. Since our chosen professions qualify as important, none of us needs to work from home. I had been out of the workforce for 5 months and had just received clearance to resume work. I was excited to get back into the workforce because I had been driving myself crazy for the previous 5 months while recovering from a knee injury. To set the scene, I like to be active. I practice martial arts extensively, and I usually visit the gym 4 days a week. In addition to all the housework I completed in the first week or two following the lockup, my soon-to-be ex-wife informs me that she will need to start working longer hours. Again, due to her field, I don't think anything of this. I had assumed, of course, that it would be every other day. However, it wasn't just for an hour or two. It was every day. I can support myself better on my knee, so when she got home 3 or more hours later, she would immediately take a shower, spend some time with her 17-year-old, and then head to bed. We resumed our physical relationship, but I soon realized that she wasn't emotionally or psychologically there for it, as you can surely anticipate. Thus, by the beginning of April, I could finally make out the picture. It was clear from all the signals that she was having an affair. I made the decision to look for solutions at that point. I thus searched the internet for indicators that a partner might be unfaithful. She was, in fact, checking off every box associated with this kind of behavior. My next question and search was, how do I find proof? I began by looking at her Facebook posts from months ago on her social media accounts. There are numerous photos of her outings with coworkers, in addition to the typical ones of our son and her with friends. These photos show a combination of people I've never met from her work, pals from work, and her closet. However, I notice a common theme in several of these images. One guy seems uncomfortable near her in every photo he takes. He's got his hand on her lower back, or his arm wrapped around her shoulder. Way too close for someone I've never met in person. It goes without saying it tasted bad, but that wasn't the worst of it. No, what was even worse was that it appears that this guy is her Facebook friend and has Instagram followers. I then proceed to search for his Facebook page. And what do you know? I have been blocked. How in the world am I unable to view this guy's Facebook profile? However, he is pals with her on Facebook. Yes, I've gone full Batman detective now. I wasn't even trying to refute it at that point. She was cheating on me with this guy and I knew it. My task for April and May was to ascertain how long and for what duration. That's what I carried out. I had no idea how much information could be extracted from phone, text, and email data. We have a family plan cell phone package up to then, and I got a good amount of information. My soon-to-be ex-wife's data history revealed that between October 2019 and April 2020, the 2 numbers she had communicated with the most were mine, and a number I had never seen before. Speculate as to whose number it was. After doing a fast Google search, I was able to verify that the guy from the pictures had once again blocked me from Facebook. At this time, the picture became increasingly more evident, but she was also deleting a lot of their inconsistent texts and messages. Nothing in the data could be a dead giveaway that proved she was cheating on me with this guy, even though I knew it. I required additional proof. At this point, I share what I've discovered with Oscar, my best friend. Did I address what I had, he asked me, and since I thought it wasn't enough, I declined. At that point, he informed me about an app one could download that purportedly allowed me to watch her conversations in real time. Since I'm not familiar with the guidelines here, I won't provide the name. After installing it and syncing my data plan, I waited a few days. When I eventually caught sight of it, it was a text exchange between the two of them, discussing how much fun they'd had the night before, and deciding to repeat it that weekend. Whoa, that blow. It would be an understatement to say that I was absolutely heartbroken. That, I suppose, was my day, and for the next 2 days I was just shattered. She was clearly affected by D-Day, so those 2 days after it happened, I deliberately tried to avoid her. She inquired what was wrong and tried to comfort me, but I ignored her and walked away, not even that I could look at her. This woman, to whom I devoted 23 years of my life, may have received everything I could have asked for and more from me as a spouse, and yet she left our union for a man who was only 5 years our oldest son's senior. By day 3, I had even stopped feeling depressed. I was furious. I told Oscar over the phone. He asked me if I had confronted her after confirming my suspicion. No, was my response. I told him I wanted him to pay me back. Divorcing her was not what I wanted to do. I wanted to ruin her. I intended to ruin her and leave her life in ruins. It would require some time to complete. Along with my studies and research on infidelity, I also came up with a plan. I was looking for a quote that really spoke to me. Something akin to unpredictability is the adversary of infidelity. That was going to be my starting point. I was going to turn her life into a living hell while surreptitiously organizing my escape route. Now that June is officially here, I still have the app installed almost every night. Observing their back and forth messaging, I'm trying to get as much information as I can. They are speaking as though they are in a committed partnership. They are involved in filthy images, sexting, romantic gestures, and the entire shebang. I had given up on looking at any of it by then. All I was doing was gathering data and organizing it on my personal server. In the meantime, I start acting strangely. I started going out at strange hours. In her presence, I begin returning home even later than she does. She asks, "What are you up to?" Because I'm using my phone a lot more than normal. I put my phone away after saying nothing special. I would also reset my password on everything to prevent her from accessing any of my belongings. To be clear, we had never received anything from one another throughout our whole marriage. However, I'm thinking that this is when her affair began. She claimed she had to change her passwords on both her phone and Facebook due to security lapses that had occurred in recent months. Yes, that's a pretty good pretext for keeping your affair from your husband. Anyway, I told my older sister and 2 more of my closest friends about my plan and let Oscar in on it as well. I trust these folks with my life. I also vowed to keep it secret. To put things in perspective, Oscar and I have been pals since we were young. We've known Joey and Nina, our other friends, since high school. Take note of Nina. She becomes relevant later on. As July approaches, my soon-to-be ex-wife is experiencing extreme paranoia. She's been asking me if I'll be home when she gets home via texts and phone calls much more frequently now. What time will I return home? During her time. I'm not asking myself what I'm doing either. The pieces. I see the seed that was sown in her mind. Things from the previous month are beginning to emerge, particularly in her interactions with pieces of garbage. She is confiding in him about her inner uncertainty and bewilderment, quoting him as being aloof and distant. This woman's fucking nerves. In between these encounters with pieces of junk, she advises that perhaps they should cease getting together at our house, since she doesn't know if I just come up and confirm that yes, she has had this fuckwit in my house because of the precise communication that piece of crap requested of her. She was genuinely upset because she thought I may be unfaithful to her. I laughed so hard and felt so happy reading that discussion that I cannot even begin to express. My unfaithful wife is fighting with her lover over whether or not she thinks her husband is having an extramarital affair. The fucking irony. Ugh. Now keep in mind that I'm not seeing anyone. I normally hang out at Oscar's or Joey's after work, drinking, watching fights, and hanging out with my friends, or hanging out with my brother-in-law, who I think of as an older brother, at my big sister's place. While my sister's husband is 58, she is 52. She had informed them of my soon-to-be ex-wife's adultery, but because he is a bit of a blabbermouth, none of my plans threatened it. Now let's fast forward to October. Things start to really pick up at that point. For the past 3 months I've been in my pretend relationship, and Sue is acutely aware that I'm purposefully separating from her. It has been as long as the day I put my strategy into action, right up to the day she came to me, October 20, 2020, that I had touched her at all, nor a kiss, nor an embrace, no initiating of closeness, nothing as if she required it. She remained an absolutely useless person, only at his house or in hotels. She phoned me at work that afternoon, which wasn't unusual before this whole thing started, but it hadn't happened in a long time. She says she has to come home right away after work, because she has something important to tell me. I promise not to tell any of you lies. I had hoped that she would confess to her affair, but naturally she didn't. Rather, when I arrive home, she asks me if I wasn't happy with her. The fucking nerve. She points out that I've been away from home for much too long. I no longer lavish her with affection, and our sexual life has ended entirely. She tells me that I was upset with her treatment of me, and she's frightened that I'm pushing her away. That was the month I was knee rehabbing. Next, the punchline appeared. If I was betraying her parents, she questioned. I threw up on the ground laughing uncontrollably, and by hysterically I mean gasping with laughter or jokes. Crazy as hell. At first glance, it appeared as though I was laughing off the idea of being disloyal. Naturally, though, I was truly chuckling at how absurd what I was seeing was. It takes me over 2 minutes of crying and beating on the ground in full-blown sobs before I can gather myself enough to respond. I shake my head, sit up and look her in the eyes for the first time in months. I don't respond to her though. I get up and dismiss myself. After giving her a quick kiss on the top of her head, retire for the evening. Later that evening in my office I made the decision. What do you know? I was curious to see what she was telling him, considering how briefly everything had happened. I open the app and sure enough they are messaging back and forth in real time. To pieces of crap, she says. He's cheating on me. I know it. He laughed right in my face when I asked him tonight. He collapsed onto the ground and let out a 5-minute laugh fit. He no longer even gives a damn about how I feel. I have no idea how or why, but he's disappeared. I'm aware that I lost him. It's karma. I am aware of that. Reading that, I must have looked like the Cheshire cat she was breaking with the smile on my face. A complete waste of time. Made an attempt to comfort her by claiming that she wouldn't have gone to him for what I wasn't able to provide for her if I'd cared for her enough. However, I could tell by the tone of her comments that she was unsure. Now that I was unable to perform my duties as a husband because of a valid injury, she had the audacity to leave our marriage and continued the affair for almost a full year. However, the notion of losing me to another woman was sufficient to cause her to falter. What an asshole you are. Now, throughout it all, I was also anticipating the second installment of my repayment plan. Organizing my financial issues in their entirety, I had a meeting with a family lawyer in September to begin the process of filing for divorce with a ton of supporting documentation. Up until then, I was piling up. Regarding divorce, New York is not at blame, and the substantial evidence I found proving Susan's infidelity essentially confirmed this. In a divorce case, I could nail her to the fucking wall. I was told by my attorney to organize all of my finances in order to be ready for any potential asset distribution. Consequently, I did a better job than that, transferring all of my funds from our joint account into my personal one in secret. Phase 2 included my starting to look for an apartment. November is here, and I have not altered my conduct. Actually, I've increased it. This is when Nina, my friend, comes in handy. For background, Nina and Sue have never shared a close relationship. Sue and Nina were the first people I met in our freshman year of high school, even in the distant past. Given that Nina is my closest female friend, Sue has perceived her as a danger. There has always been a suggestion. In regards to Nina, I don't trust her from Sue. Although she has never said so outright, it's clear to anyone who listens. On the other hand, Nina has never been a huge admirer of my relationship with Sue in the past. The fact that I didn't treat Sue's group of friends the same way that Sue was treating our small square pals infuriated Nina, because she knew why Sue was acting in that way. Her and the Sue circle. There are no male buddies left besides piece of trash even today. However, the only girl in my square is Nina. Nina, who was stranded abroad because of the illness, arrived back in New York City on November 3rd. Oscar, Joey, and I made the decision to spend the evening at Joey's house enjoying dinner and beverages in celebration of her return. We were just 5 in number. Following the CDC standards, Oscar, Joey's wife Scott, who was also Nina's sister Nina, and I did. We treat the Rona with great respect. Being the cunning brain that she is, Nina devises a sinister plan to set Sue off. She recommended that we snap some pictures similar to the ones I found of Sue and piece of crap weeks ago and upload them on Facebook. And we actually carried that out. Sue didn't find out until the 5th, I suppose, since some friends read my updates and saw how uncomfortable I was getting close to Nina. This truly confused her as she continued to think that I was unfaithful. She wanted to blame Nina. I'm nearly positive of it, but she was aware that Nina had spent most of the year trapped in Europe. Nevertheless, that didn't stop her from trying to dress me down that evening because I looked so, quote, Hansry in the pictures. I saw this as a perfect chance to land my knockout blow with the lead jab. What about the pictures of you and that piece of garbage from the previous year, I asked. He seemed rather handy in them. Where did you witness me become irrationally upset about it? A deer caught in headlights. I had never even mentioned the man's name before. As she attempted to explain away those pictures, the hamster wheel in her thoughts began to spin in real time. She didn't even know I saw them until then. I utilize Facebook for this reason when I do publish anything. People treat it like an event, which is why the pictures of Nina in particular gained so much popularity in our social circles. And go on to explain. Yes, she did. That's how he is with everyone. He's just a genuinely amiable person. I can see how it appears, but it is empty. I apologize if those images offended you. I'll get rid of them. No, the pictures of my injuries. Yes, it's true that you've been avoiding the guy while lying to me about how much work you're doing and how much fun you're having with friends. My revenge stems more from the famous statement made by Star Trek TNG that it's a dish best served cold. Sue started being very clinging and attentive to me after that night. Like, infuriatingly so. She has made attempts to show me love and closeness, but I have consistently refused her advances. I'm continuing to record whatever she says during this entire time. A bit of garbage. Although by now I had already lost them. My drive to keep my marriage intact was gone. The day I carried out the first part of my strategy, I checked out. She's telling him that things have become worse for me. Said she feels like I despise her and that she doesn't know what to do. Then the shocking revelation. She claims that she can no longer see him. She feels as though retribution is strangling her, and the guilt is too much for her. She can't let me go lost. She claims to love pieces of crap unconditionally, but she still has feelings for me. And she needs to work on her marriage before she loses me. No, sweetheart. That piece of junk is probably 8 months too late. Says all these beautiful things and loses his *T because he doesn't love you the way I do. Additionally, you are misbehaving. This is no way to just throw me away. That would be the final text chain. Up until roughly 3 weeks ago, that is. Sue finds herself in a state of uncertainty for the rest of November and into December. She's attempting to assess my mental state, but is still unable to determine whether or not I am genuinely being disloyal. She isn't answering him while her piece of garbage keeps blowing up her phone every day. She would swiftly put her phone away after checking it frequently. In the meantime, phase 2 of the plan was now formally finished. The divorce decree was completed. I had signed a 2-year lease on a studio apartment that I had located. I had all of my money in my own account. I was all set to launch my haymaker. We've reached Thanksgiving then. My eldest and his significant other were arranging a little get-together for our close family members. So me, Sue, the parents of our oldest girlfriend and our youngest. We have an amazing evening. My eldest girlfriend, who is pursuing a career in culinary arts, prepared every meal on her own. A female is an amazing chef. Let me tell you, I had to pretend that everything was fine between Sue and me. I made repeated attempts to make love to her that night. Give me a cheek kiss, adorable tiny hugs. From behind, I put my arms around her shoulders. She was aware of the movements and took great pleasure in them. Remember that I kissed the top of her head the night she confronted me in October. And that was the last time I had ever touched her. Thus, hardly 2 months. To be honest, I was disgusted by what I was doing, but I had no choice. I couldn't jeopardize the strategy and my distance from her in front of my boys. Alarms would go off for my oldest girlfriend and her parents. My youngest then decides he wants to spend the night with his older brother. So I went home with Sue. She said, "I don't know what you're going through, baby, but I'm here for you." And thanked me for being so kind to her on the way home. I had to hold back before erupting into uncontrollably loud laughing once more and replying, "I know, I just need time." That night we had sex for the first time since spring. Realistically speaking, I reasoned that since I was going to erase her from my life, I may as well get some action first. It wasn't lovemaking, but I won't get into that. She was a ball of flesh lying there after I was done, attempting to identify which way the truck that had run her over was going. Not hugging or anything. I simply got up, had a shower, and then retired to my office to sleep. I used a condom though, much to her dismay. For the first time in 2 fucking decades. It certainly confused her, but she didn't ask any questions. The following morning, when I checked my handy-dandy spy software, I saw that she had responded to a piece of rubbish for the first time in weeks. The guy wrote a novella. He declared his affection for her. Claimed that she was wasting her time attempting to fan a flame that had burned out in me. That after spending 23 years in a prison cell with me, she deserved to feel the love and care of a man who would value her. It should be noted that this man, who is 27 years old and 5 years older than our eldest son, is attracted to a 45-year-old married mother of 2 children. What a wonderful, excellent service. She made the decision to ruin our marriage and the house we had built for this guy. This is a pretty boy with a sensitive spot for hatred, she said, essentially restating their previous conversation's contents. She loves him and cherishes their time together. She can't lose me though. She will always have a spot in her heart for him, and if he so chooses, they may continue to be friends. Even if I'm still the love of her life. However, their physical relationship is no longer there. That week he pleaded with her to visit him one last time. And yet, you guessed it. Yes, she replied. For the road. One more surely. Who am I to make any comments? I had treated her like that the night before. Naturally, I included everything in the archive that I had created. Phase 3, the last phase of Operation Shinobi Ghost, began on December 4th. The divorce decree was ready. I got my new apartment set up. I now had to begin gradually packing everything and leaving the house. I had to tell my lads the news first though. That Friday night I invited my oldest child to come over, got them to join me in my office dugout, and set the table. Not the details, but that I was intending to file for divorce shortly, and that their mother had been unfaithful to me for more than a year. This particularly disturbed my 17-year-old son, who had just had his first taste of adultery. Yes, just 4 months earlier his first girlfriend had cheated on him. The thought that his own mother was capable of doing this crushed his heart a second time. After he got over it, my oldest suggested taking his brother and living with him until everything worked itself out, which I concurred with. We filled it with some of his belongings. Was I going to be okay, he asked. Yes, kid, I will be okay, I assured him. You're doing great too. I assure you that everything will work out fine. After that, they left. Now that the most difficult step had passed, it was time to arm the nuclear weapons. Oscar would assist me in moving some of my most delicate belongings out of the house day by day over the course of the following few weeks. I left him the extra key and gave him a list of everything he needed to make sure he got it, while Sue and I were at work. Sue wouldn't even realize any of this was missing unless you specifically told her. I also obtained a new phone and number, which I shared with everyone I needed to get in touch with. Sue is unaware of the lie I'm maintaining on her in the meanwhile, giving her little tokens of affection in order to divert her attention while she's still in contact with the piece of junk. There's still an emotional thing going on, but not as much as there had been before. It's a little foggy, but it's there anyway. Throughout, I am gathering everything, and I really do mean everything. Since I began the plan, I have backed up every piece of information, call logs, texts, photos, emails, and more, and I have begun printing copies of everything. People, I think I spent more than $1,500 on binders, staples, materials, printer ink, paper, and everything else, and I meticulously categorized every item from the start of the event until the very end. It was December 16th, 2 weeks ago. What about the binders? 14 of them. I then wrapped each one like a gift and placed it in a box, addressing it to different people. Her mother, her parents, her brother, her sister, her HR department, and a few of her friends. And more pieces of junk. Parents shipped out all those doctors they loved to the post office. Delivery is expected on December 16th. December 22nd. 24th. Perfect. Thus, it is now Christmas Eve. Sue arrives home at her regular time. I'm not sure if she noticed that piece of crap had given up on her on the 18th figure. As usual, I'd gotten all the mileage I needed out of it. After showering, she spends some time with me. She goes to bed after I blow her back out on the couch in the living room. Finally, the last stage was upon me. Finally, the nuclear weapon I had been preparing since June was ready to go off. I got up in the middle of the night and finished wrapping one of the 3 binders that were left, placed it on my side of the bed with a message attached, and the divorce papers taped to the inside cover. Take note of the note that says "Merry Christmas" next to it. I left my lawyer's business card and my old phone. I packed the last of my most important belongings, enough to fit into 2 backpacks, and I moved out of the house where I had spent the previous 23 years for the final time. That was a week ago, my friends. I am therefore totally disconnected. Dawn's shadow vanished without explanation. I'm monitoring the fallout because she's barred me on Facebook, but hasn't blocked me for whatever reason. It is very magnificent. I dispatched packages and they arrived at their destination. Sue is also being crucified. She was utterly overdressed by her younger sister. Her parents have both disapproved of her. She was completely ruined by my mother. Similar to... Holy crap. Daughter, I know my mother can be harsh, but the things she called Sue... Holly, we're going to duck. She has been searching wildly for information on my whereabouts. However, those who do aren't commenting on anything on her Facebook page. She must know I'm probably seeking for her because she's reaching out to me so desperately. But without my lawyer here, I'm not saying a damned word to her. The next time I breathe in together with her will be then. I've exposed her to everyone who cares about her, so she can't manipulate the story to make me seem like a bad person. Furthermore, from what? A friend they both have who works at the same company. It appears that she and the piece of junk will be placed on administrative leave starting tomorrow. Thus, it seems likely that she will continue beyond 2021. Not working. Regarding the last 2 binders, I put the last one in my storage unit to be destroyed at Joey's fire pit after the divorce is official, and the other one I gave to my attorney as my last piece of proof for my upcoming divorce. Should I feel bad about this? No. Not in the slightest at all. I treated this woman right for 23 years. She got the house she desired from me. She got the family she desired from me. I gave her the life I believed was ours, and I had unwavering love for her. I have never failed. I have never gone astray. I have never once given my vows a second thought when a problem arose that I thought was interfering with our marriage. We worked things out as best we could when I went to her and told her. Instead of telling me she was dissatisfied with our sex life at the time, she chose to go out with a young punk who made her tingle and chose to find solace in another man's bed. Therefore, no, I don't feel sorry for her or for what I did. I don't care if she burns in hell. My house, my car, and possibly a few $100s a month in alimony are the most I might lose. However, given that NYS is at fault and the divorce was filed under the law of adultery, that could be excused given the overwhelming amount of evidence I presented. As for me personally, I'm never going to look back too long since she's dead to me. Didn't read about the 23-year wife. Had an affair for a year with an employee who was 18 years her junior. For most of 2020, I pretended to be having an affair of my own while gathering proof of hers. She had divorce papers drawn up in the early fall, gathered all the evidence in early December, shipped binders full of the evidence to all of her loved ones, and around Christmas Eve she left a binder containing the divorce notice on my pillow along with my phone and the card of her attorney while she slept. Her life utterly collapsed in the days that followed. Starting on Christmas Eve, following Christmas. NYS's quick edit isn't entirely to blame. My lawyer has advised me that my case fits under the category of conditions when a divorce might be sought under blame. Tomorrow, the soon-to-be ex-wife and her attorney will meet with me. I suppose I'll just provide an update here. The second edit is directed at the man who claimed to be a retired private investigator on YouTube, and in my message saying, I got cheated on for over a year and all of my evidence will not be submitted in court. With 20 years of expertise, you think you can duck? Duck away. I spoke with my lawyer briefly about the situation earlier today, and the information I received outside of the calls is accurate. Look for a more productive way to spend your time than pestering me, friend.
Now start second story.
After discovering that my wife was having an affair with a strange man, she still stubbornly denied it. When I presented the secret recordings of her affair, she continued to show no remorse and refused to admit she was wrong. I had assumed that I would get to the lawyer's office early, but Dave and his attorney were in the conference room when my lawyer and I arrived. Observing him with a lovely woman triggered my typical envious reaction, which made me secretly feel less than him. He was more attractive at 48 than he was at 20, tall and robust, running an effective company while serving as the head of the community's Chamber of Commerce. The idea that, should today not go well, I might never feel his protective arms again made me shudder. Dave hardly acknowledged me when I entered the meeting with my attorney. The red-haired lawyer stretched out to reassure him, and my face went white. I took it to mean she was eager to get out of the meeting so she could go after him. My spouse was a talented man who knew how to utilize his charm, so I knew she would love it. Dave gave her a smile but didn't say anything to me. I had to go to the meeting while my lawyer talked to the red-haired lawyer since I was getting frustrated with Dave's insistence on not talking to me. I took a seat. Dave reached into my big bag, pulled out a folder, opened it, and spread out the completed 2-page script. I could see Dave grinning slightly, so I knew he knew how well I had prepared. He placed a single sheet of paper next to a laptop that he had set up and speakers connected in. Subtly he placed his palms on the table and gave me a courteous but callous gaze. No hate, no grief, and no rage. I spent 3 days getting ready for this meeting and knew my script by heart. I appealed to his feelings by drawing on my understanding of David Brown. We convened to talk about Mrs. Julianne Brown's consent to sign a petition for divorce. If Dave spent an hour or more listening to her, I proposed that we start the hour immediately if everyone is ready. As she turned the timer knob, she said, it started ticking loudly, highlighting the room's stillness. Dave insisted on having lawyers present instead of holding a private meeting, which irritated me. I had given myself a full 45 minutes to vent my thoughts before forcing Dave to acknowledge that there was a reason for my unacceptable behavior. With just the two of us, it's uncomfortable, even more embarrassing when in public. Well, there's no need focusing on the drawbacks. There was nothing for me to do. I crossed my fingers and glanced at my superfluous notes, keeping in mind my friend Sonia's advice. I gave a throat clearing. I conveyed my appreciation to Dave for agreeing to meet with me today. I admitted my mistake and made it clear that it had nothing to do with his failure and everything to do with my own conceit. I hoped that Dave would value my candor as I had thought about this for days. I thought he wanted to forgive me, and my speech was meant to provide the explanation he needed, thinking of what would happen if the children were at home. I thought about pulling Dave. Breaking the family card is not possible, certain that it would be successful. I looked at his face, seeing how he responded to what I had said, and I was surprised. During the pause that followed, Dave's face stayed expressionless. He didn't even look me in the eye systematically. He lifted his pen and annotated the first sentence in his notes with a check mark. I was almost entirely confused by my first words. I said exactly what he expected, belying my confidence in my conceit. I failed to remember that, in addition to basing my argument on my 30 years of acquaintance with him, he had also been observing me for those 30 years. I'm not ashamed to say that I was taken aback. I underlined how crucial it was to follow the plan and reiterated that my own stupid and selfish choices led to the predicament with Dave. I expressed the sense of being lost in the world without kids, old, ugly, and useless. I told him I worked with him on a church committee and that's how I met him. He was smart, a great seducer who knew just how to play to your weaknesses, and he started acting like a friend last year when you were frequently absent from church, listening to my problems following the meetings. However, Jason recommended visiting a cafe one day following a church gathering. Regretfully, I consented. I had no idea he could get past a woman's defenses. It all seemed innocent and he seemed like a good friend. We moved from coffee shops to restaurants where he continued to vent about his wife. Though it sounds corny, at that point I had faith in him. The dining establishments grew more sophisticated, and I enjoyed the gifts he gave me more. Dave, you have no idea how pleasant it is to have a guy who is 15 years your junior try to win you over. You would, however, be pleased that I turned down his request to sleep with him 4 months prior. When his intentions were obvious after that, I ought to have declined to meet him. However, by that point I had grown somewhat dependent on the result. His attention and compliments lifted my confidence and ego. I fell silent and wiped my eyes with the finger I'd used to rub the piece of onion in my pocket. It stung so much that I didn't dare rub my other eye. One teary-eyed should have been enough. I stopped, started again, faltered and hesitated. Oh honey, I'm so ashamed that I didn't break up with him. He took me to a restaurant and bought a $1.300 bottle of Grange, even though he himself doesn't drink wine. Instead of wasting it, I drank almost all of it. I'm pretty sure that's what he wanted. I was too nervous to resist him. When we left the restaurant, he offered to take me home and I foolishly agreed. Once in the driveway he leaned over and kissed me, but I was too drunk to stop him. You know how I get after a couple of glasses of wine. Then he started touching my chest. At this point my logic was completely broken, and I remember just thinking that I should move him out of the driveway so the neighbors wouldn't see us. For the same reason I opened the garage door and forced him to park inside. I cheated a little by admitting that even in the car I thought Jason might be staying a while, and I certainly didn't want the neighbors to see a strange car in the driveway the next morning. But it was all a calculated risk on my part. I knew enough about men in general to understand that being betrayed was a major blow to a man's ego, and I wanted Dave to ensure that no one else ever found out about it. Well, except for 2 lawyers. Well, Jason got out of the car as the garage door was closing and started kissing me again. As I said, I had already drunk most of the bottle of Grange and was ripe for plucking. He grabbed my key and led me inside. I took him to one of the spare bedrooms, and I will be ashamed of this until the day I die. I let him do whatever he wanted with me. I'm so sorry, Dave. My only saving grace was that I was composed enough with him to get him to put on a safe. After Jason came, I think we both fell asleep. I because I was drunk, and he because he must have been tired after a 4 or 5 month chase. I know for sure I wouldn't have done it if I wasn't drunk and depressed when I woke up, and I definitely would have kicked him to the curb immediately. Instead you entered the room and turned on the light. I have never been so ashamed in my life. The look of pain on your face just crushed me. I realized how much misuse I caused you and us with one simple mistake. With tears still flowing from one eye, I turned my pleading gaze to my husband, having spent a lifetime together. I knew that I could read his expression like an open book, and be able to judge how my request was going. Not true. His expression remained neutral. In fact, he didn't even look at me. Strange, but he was fiddling with the laptop in front of him. I thought he was writing notes until he clicked the link on his screen. A voice came from the speakers. My voice? Don't kiss me. You reek of beer. What about you rotten grape breath? How come? I had one lousy glass of white. The audio clip stopped and the room fell into a thunderous silence. I think that's how it was. The roaring sound in my head drowned out everything else. Indeed. I felt embarrassed and humiliated when Dave walked in on me that night with Jason before lifting Jason by his hair and beating the crap out of his body. But that was insignificant compared to the fact that I had just been caught in a huge lie. This completely threw me off track. I was so confident that my script would work. My eyes darted around the room. Dave's lawyer smiled slightly. Mine looked slightly embarrassed. Dave just looked at me expectantly with that damn blank expression. Afterwards, I will never understand why I didn't immediately realize what it all meant. How absurd is that? Dave had an audio recording of my meeting with Jason that night being wound up. It never occurred to me to follow the logic of this. Why does he need a voice recorder there? If he didn't know in advance that he could record something, what else did we say? The silence stretched uncomfortably for a long time, and I looked at the cryptic shorthand of my notes, and looking back, stupidly plunged into the script I had prepared. I clung to him like a drowning man clings to debris. It was only once. It won't happen again. Nothing like that. Please believe me. I just wasn't strong enough to resist him. But I wasn't so out of control that I wouldn't force him to use a protection, or let him take me on our bed. He wanted it, but I would never do that, no matter how drunk I was. We were in Megan's old room, right? Dave just stared at me regretfully, and I didn't know what was worse. His mournful face or his impassive one. He shook his head and moved to the computer. I felt rather than hear him double-click the icon, and I shuddered till I just enjoyed watching how you lie in front of me full of desire. It is quite hot. Then once it's finished, another double-click and Jason's voice again. When can we have time in bed again? In your clueless husband's bed? It was very cool. This time Dave clicked and ended the clip and then just stared at me silently accusatory. What could I even say? Everything I said was debunked not by Dave but by my own words. Protection. It was a one-time drunken error not obtaining closeness with my hubby in our own bed. The whole thing shattered as a falsehood in about 30 words. Stand. Stand. I'm speechless. Despite the awkwardness, I looked to Dave for guidance. His expression was expressionless. I became aware that I had just 60 minutes left to save my marriage, and I must say they were not going well. When I saw my attorney looking at her watch and forcing me to concentrate on the running clock, I made myself stop worrying. I apologize for lying to you, Dave, saying that this was the first time. All I wanted was to avoid hurting you any more than I already had. I reasoned that you wouldn't be as upset if I could persuade you that it was an isolated incident and that it was done for the reason I mentioned. I staggered back into silence. Shall I now acknowledge that for more than 6 months I dated Jason multiple times a week? The issue was I had no idea what Dave was aware of. He had discussions on tape that showed this wasn't the first or only night he found us. What more though did he know? At least once more, hiding the recorder where I typically did with Jason suggested suspicion. Simply put, I was ignorant. But I also knew that it would all end if I was discovered to be lying even one more time. Now, Juliana, let's be evasive. Remain factual and steer clear of specifics. It took some time, but in all honesty, Jason did manage to seduce me. He seems drawn to elderly ladies. It's true that I felt more confident when a man nearly my age was pursuing me. I was weak, I admit it. I considered claiming that on my first use of the master bed, I only got in it once. Though it would be a falsehood, it would improve my image. What kept me back though was not knowing how long Dave had known about my extramarital affairs. I've chosen to say nothing about this. I was unable to keep quiet about everything though. I looked at my notes, realizing I was running out of time to make things right and not knowing how to go. After learning the truth, I ignored the first few points and concentrated on the words that were bolded. I made it clear that I would always love and respect Dave, highlighting the fact that I loved him just as much as I always did. I clarified that Jason was an extra layer that added an abundance of love to my love for Dave rather than taking away from it, if I had to put it that way. After I stopped talking, Dave looked back at his laptop screen, scowled and looked a little lost for words. He did, however, finally become more at ease as he listened to the tape, which was an extension of the previous soundtrack. When Dave frowned, I realized he was looking for a symbol on the screen, and then I realized it was one of the open files. It would have been preferable if he had not understood it, and had obviously begun anew. Rewinding the video to its start, I went back to Jason's inquiry regarding intimacy in our marriage bed, similar to how I felt the first time, knowing that my words had once again condemned me. I already said never to you again, not following the previous instance. I was thankful that evening when Dave came out of the shower and tripped over a sizable patch of white. My account about sneezing was accepted by Dave, who explained the drop away as snot sinking further into the seat. I knew the words that would come next would be predictable. Despite the fact that when I first spoke to them, I felt arrogant. That sensation vanished. Dave was distracted when I offered to clean his leg and did it in a polite manner, commenting, "You have to be honest, sweetie, because occasionally your hubby acts like a naive fool." I enjoyed talking about the times he had to hide in the closet when Dave got home early, and other instances where we managed to avoid being discovered. Offensive. Yes, Dave has no idea. At first, I thought it was cute that he had such high regard for me. He's just a stupid, ignorant moron now. I sometimes think that while he's in the room, we could spend some time in bed together. I realized I was repeating a pointless discussion because of the sarcastic tone. I couldn't even persuade myself that I loved and respected my spouse, much less him, with those remarks and tone. Confusion struck once more. I told myself I loved and appreciated Dave before we met. But how's it conceivable after what I said and did? Immersed in the tense, ticking silence that followed the last nail in my coffin, Dave looked over at me. I turned to his attorney because I was unable to face him directly. I shuddered to see her look of such contempt. Any doubts that Dave was just another customer disappeared from her mind. I turned my head away from her and looked at my attorney. She too, failed to conceal her contempt with enough speed. Here I am, battling for what lies ahead, surrounded by people who treat me as though I'm a dog park object, and I should have one of them on my side. My self-esteem soon followed suit, as my confidence quickly faded like the midday sun. Maybe that's why I went back over my notes and decided to take a hostile stance. I told Dave that he had been paying me less and less attention for the past 6 months and that I felt taken for granted, traveling more often on business and acting as though he was pulling away from me. I felt disoriented because all of this happened at the same time the kids left the house. I told him how he never came through for me, never comforted me when I needed it, or reassured me about my age and beauty. I cringed as his fingers danced and I saw Dave's eyes flick back to his screen. When I opened the chosen file, I could see that Jason had said these things shortly after our second meeting. It was just before Dave's breaking point that fateful night. Jason mentioned how we haven't been having much bedtime lately, and said he wished they could get together more often. He talked about the postponed trip and how I had asked him to restrict Dave's diet. Jason clarified that Dave had an urgent meeting that evening, which was the only reason he had the chance. He also said he wished Dave would get out of town more frequently. Jason shot back annoyed, "Well, I want more," to which the video cut off again, feeling embarrassed. I lowered my gaze to the table, dodging 3 critical looks, and thought back to how I was feeling at the time of our previous conversation. In actuality, the novelty of having a partner, even a single one, is youthful and vibrant. I had lost respect for Dave as a result of my actions in betraying my husband, and Jason was starting to get on my nerves, and my conscience was starting to prickle at least. I believed that the main cause of my emotional detachment from my husband was a loss of respect. I had every intention of blaming him for separating from me, even as I was getting ready for this meeting. I came to see that allowing myself to keep betraying him was a lie. I emotionally divorced Dave. Cutting him off in bed was a simple option, simply because Dave's lovemaking was so distinct from Jason's impatience that it was impossible to mix the two. I started to turn down my husband's attempts since I felt that what I was doing was extremely inappropriate, as this confirmed. Well, he pressed for a bit, then he stopped. I instantly realized that it should have been screaming for my attention months ago. Dave suddenly gave up his bed life. Around the same time he began working longer hours and going away more often. At the time, I thought he was also emotionally distancing himself from me. I closed my eyes, now entirely bewildered about who was distancing himself from who. And then something clicked. Dave must have known for a long time. That's why he knew he had to hide the recorder in Megan's room. Oh no. My entire strategy for this meeting was to downplay my offense, restore Dave's damaged ego, consume something modest, everything to regain my life and the future I yearned for so badly. I believed I was soothing a bull that had just been hurt, but if my assumption that he knew at least 2 weeks before he found out or even confronted me was correct, then he was far more crafty than I had realized, and I was wasting my time appealing to his feelings. Get up. Get up. Put simply, I didn't know what to do. When I plan, I perform far better than when I'm not as organized. 2 pages of notes follow. However, I had to take action. There was not much time left. This was verified by the clock's ticking. I gathered my notes and started searching for hope out of desperation. It took me a very long time to process the words since my head was throbbing so hard. Nothing caught my attention. Then, with the game having changed so drastically, I recognized that the recordings were a red herring. What was Dave thinking about if he knew I was heading out for a while? It goes without saying that my betrayal offended him. Above all, though, he was concerned about my drive. Did I not feel content with the amount and caliber of his romantic gestures? Do I want to explore my kinky side because I find him boring? Did I truly adore Jason? Was I actually going to take off after him? I might dispel these doubts and anxieties. I took a chance by staring into those lifeless eyes, debating whether or not to tell lies once more. If only I could recall what else I discussed that fatal night with Jason. I wish I could guarantee that this is the only evening. David took notes. The sequence had to be questionable, of course. Put recorders in place. Hold back. For a while he couldn't be certain about this. All in all, he was a poor performer. I wanted so badly to show him the reality. I still had respect and affection for him. This was demonstrated by my intense hope that he wouldn't leave me. My worry of losing my extremely comfortable lifestyle was greatly exceeded. But how can I show him that I value him? What's the use of attempting to defend demeaning him to my lover as a sop to my conscience, and forging a link between Jason and me after we've all seen me call him foolish in front of my beloved? Nothing that caught my eye. The same held true for our love for him. The wild horses could not have concluded that I still loved him if I had discovered that he was lying to me. It will therefore take some time to persuade him that I value and love him. Once, I was able to persuade him not to require that I sign the divorce papers right away. How much longer, though, must that infernal timer run to persuade him of this? There was no doubt about that. My subsequent statements were intended to garner points, many points, bringing forth my bravery. I looked at Dave from across the table. I told him it made sense that he thought I had stopped loving and respecting him, but that was untrue. I declared my undying love for him and our shared life. I told him how much I really wanted to spend the rest of my days with him, and I realized how bad I had been, that I didn't love Jason and that he was just a distraction. Besides, I told Dave it was never my goal to run away with Jason. I acknowledged that what I had done was wrong, especially when Jason suggested that we cut back on our intimacy, considering the circumstances. I told myself that I had no idea why I'd done it, especially after persuading myself that I was just giving Jason too much more than Dave could manage. I made it clear that my acts were motivated only by passion and selfishness, and that Jason lacked Dave's expertise and endurance. While the physical element provided a momentary sense of fulfillment, it lacked authentic feeling. I explained that my interactions with Jason were not the same perversions that I had denied. Dave, over the years, time appeared to slow down, reflecting the speed of individuals who were about to expire. To my left, my marriage was falling apart slowly while everything around me continued to move at a regular pace. My attorney looked at me, her pen falling on the floor in disgust. It was obvious that I couldn't even buy someone's support at this point. To get a better look at the laptop screen, Dave's lawyer leaned to the side. To my surprise, instead of playing sound files as I had thought, he was playing video clips. The seriousness of the issue increased upon this awareness. Dave wasn't looking at me as his wife held his hand in support, but his expression indicated a deep pain, as if the man who was supposed to be there for him had abandoned him. I saw a brief look of devastation cross his face, and the eye next to mine dropped a single tear. I wondered if he was really hurting or if he had toughened himself up by staring at the TV through all of the mayhem. A few unimportant details came to mind. Since the recording was made at least 3 weeks before the crash, Dave had had ample opportunity to observe my betrayal and identify a pattern. The heat that had filled the room was replaced with a feeling of sloppiness, filth, and tastelessness as the speakers played the music. Helplessly, I turned my attention to the table where my lawyer had spread out the divorce paperwork. Dave had revealed some disgusting activity that I was powerless to stop. He effortlessly shredded all of my attempts at justification, reduction, and weak attempts at reconciliation. Dave, it was over. I didn't say a word today while conducting an orchestra in character. Rather, he gestured to the orchestral portion he wished to perform next, employing his talents and knowledge to perform a silent symphony of disconnection. No, Dave wasn't the one. With a noose around my neck and blindfolded, I climbed the scaffold myself, kicking the switch. Dave did little more than set up the scaffold and leave after playing the final footage. He had no hope of saving me because he knew exactly what I was going to say, and I had forgotten that he had also given me the same amount of time to gaze at him when I developed my arguments based on my intimate understanding of him from my 3 decades of observation. She was staring at me with sharp, piercing eyes, and I had to finally flee from the excruciating embarrassment and shame I needed to get away, sprinting back to my home residence, until Dave received the notice of eviction anyway. That was stipulated in the contract, a flight to kids who hopefully will never know and will always love me without conditions. The majority of my life was lost, yet the only path to salvation was through a receipt. In one seamless action, I took the pen, signed the 2 papers, and threw it away. Although I was shocked that Dave's company wasn't worth more, that's what my lawyer's evaluation said. Dave had plenty of time, of course, to hide. The majority of it. Thankfully, the final recording had completed by then, and the ticking silence had returned. After signing the documents, my attorney collected them and put the remainder in her briefcase, giving me a copy. She disappeared from the room, leaving me sitting there, motionless, caught between the urge to leave and the need to send a positive message. I was starving for a glimmer of optimism, something to let me believe that there might be a chance to reignite the passion in the future, to express to Dave my continued concern for his well-being. My thoughts were interrupted by the piercing sound of an alarm clock, which made me get up and say my encouraging words. With both hands clasped around Dave's palm, the jackal begged him not to go after Jason, saying she would never be able to forgive herself if he ended up behind bars. In retaliation, Dave released another incriminating video, mercifully without my voice but with the voice of another woman, using a tone that verges on strident. She introduced herself as Mrs. Jason, and talked about what would happen to Jason if her brothers found out. At first I believed that Jason's silence following the beating was a sign of fear, but now I wondered if the fraudster would be better off divorced and destitute. The idea that he might die as a result of his involvement with me began to weigh heavily on my conscience. I was about to turn to leave, but I was unable to look Dave in the eye, whether he was laughing or crying or if his face was expressionless. I was hurt by everything, a continual reminder of all the harm I had done to this wonderful man. He had taken a severe emotional hit at my hands and had lost everything, save for my property and money. He was right to be angry with me until he started crying. I eked out a weak farewell, sweetheart. I padded over to the door. I threw away my pitiful attempt to save my former life like a plague insect. Maybe my daughter Megan may come see me while I fade into nothingness. Joel, my kid, if she wasn't accessible. I heard voices behind me just as I was about to push the door. One more recording from the dam, an ecstatic young man accused of cheating. A recognizable female voice interrupted, inquiring, "Are you certain, Dad? I'm going to drink by myself today."
Now start second story.
Harold Jacobs grew up in a cold, unwelcoming household. His mother Brenda was distant, while his stepfather Trevor provided the only warmth in his life. Trevor, a kind-hearted trucker, treated Harold as his own son, despite not being his biological father. Brenda, however, resented Harold, seeing him as a reminder of her past failures. This environment shaped Harold into a man determined to create a family that would never feel the coldness he experienced as a child. Despite his mother's emotional distance, Harold found comfort in Trevor's guidance, who taught him the values of hard work, respect, and love, principles that Harold held dear as he grew up. In high school, Harold met Sandra, whom he believed would help him build the loving family he always wanted. They married young after Sandra became pregnant with their daughter Rebecca. Harold joined the army, then transitioned to a security career, all to provide the best life for his family. But the foundation of love and trust he worked so hard to build wasn't as strong as he had hoped. Harold never saw himself as extraordinary. His job as a security officer often involved enforcing rules, dealing with unruly individuals, and handling the associated paperwork. Despite the challenges, Harold found satisfaction in his work and took pride in supporting his family. His wife, Sandra, a beautiful woman with youthful looks, worked at a local bank, eventually becoming a bank manager after attending community college. Together they provided a stable life for their daughter Rebecca. Harold and Sandra were both 18 when Rebecca was born. With help from their families, they managed to care for Rebecca, eventually moving into their own home. Harold joined the army after high school, serving 4 years before landing a security job with an armored truck service. Over time, he worked his way up to become the regional director for a large, world-renowned security company in the Northeast. Meanwhile, Sandra's career at the bank brought additional financial stability to the family. Rebecca, now 17, was once the center of Harold's world, but their relationship grew strained as she got older. Since turning 12, Rebecca had become increasingly rude to Harold, a change that deeply hurt him. He chalked it up to typical teenage rebellion, but it felt different. One incident that stood out was when Rebecca was 12 and Harold asked her to go to bed. She responded with a defiant. Another time at 14, she publicly embarrassed him by yelling. Her sweet 16 was particularly memorable for Harold. He worked tirelessly, pulling triple shifts and working back-to-back 17-day stretches to save up for a down payment on a used 2014 Chevy Impala for her birthday. Despite all his effort, Rebecca's reaction was dismissive. Harold was hurt by her ingratitude, and though he managed to hold back his anger, the memory lingered. Later, Rebecca allowed a boyfriend to drive the car, which ended in a crash that totaled it. Though Harold was relieved she was unharmed, seeing the wrecked car brought him to tears, as all his hard work seemed wasted. Harold often found himself alone in disciplining their daughter Rebecca, as his wife Sandra never supported him. She would only intervene to excuse Rebecca's behavior and criticize Harold. After a long day of work, Harold was heading home, but he found some comfort in knowing he had saved up to surprise Sandra with a trip to Jamaica for their anniversary. They had planned this trip for years but never found the time. Harold loved his wife deeply and looked forward to surprising her. Driving home in his 2024 Chevrolet Camaro, Harold reminisced about how he, Sandra and his friend would debate whether Ford or Dodge was better. Despite the challenges, he loved his wife and daughter and cherished his family. As he approached his house, he reflected on the struggles he'd faced, but felt grateful for his family. When he walked in, he saw Rebecca coming down the stairs in a revealing outfit. Concerned, he asked, "Where are you going to dress like that?" Rebecca, rolling her eyes, replied, "Going to the movies and then a house party in Lafayette, I told you." Harold, ignoring her attitude, responded, "You didn't mention a house party. If you had, I would have said no. And there's no way I'm letting you go out dressed like that. You're grounded." Rebecca was outraged. "Grounded? For what? My clothes?" Harold calmly explained, "It's not just the clothes. You're grounded because you're failing math, despite my warnings. And for skipping school to hang out with friends. That's why." Rebecca's anger boiled over and she spat, "You pathetic excuse of a man. Mom, and I should have left you years ago." Without thinking, Harold backhanded Rebecca, sending her onto the couch. Shocked by his own action, he stared at her with a cold intensity. He then spoke firmly, "If you live under my roof, you follow my rules. I won't tolerate disrespect in my home. Do you understand?" Terrified, Rebecca nodded. "Yes, sir." "Good. You're grounded for 3 weeks. Now go to your room." Afterward, Harold went to the fridge for a beer, bracing himself for the argument he knew would come with Sandra. After finishing his drink, he knocked on Rebecca's door. Hearing her small voice, he entered and saw she had been crying. Despite everything, she was still his daughter and he loved her. "Honey, I'm sorry I slapped you. It shouldn't have happened. But when you called me a loser, something in me snapped. I love you, but I won't be disrespected in my own home. If something is bothering you, we need to talk about it. I'll always love you." Rebecca, though still upset, didn't respond. Harold kissed her forehead and left the room. An hour later, Sandra sped into the driveway, furious. The moment she walked in, she demanded, "Who the hell do you think you are, slapping our baby like that, Harold?" Harold remained calm but firm. "Good evening, honey. Welcome home. How was work today? I ask because you skipped greeting me as you often do lately. To answer your question, I'm her father. And while I love our daughter, I won't tolerate disrespect in the home I provide for our family." Sandra's eyes narrowed, irritated by Harold's firm stance. She took a breath and asked, "Sandra called me at work and said you slapped her. Is that true?" Harold read her expression before replying, "Yes, I did. I slapped her hard enough that she landed on the couch. She needed to understand that her behavior is unacceptable." Sandra was shocked, covering her mouth in disbelief. "So, you're just going to slap our daughter around when she talks back?" Harold's anger grew, though he remained calm. "No, but I will discipline her when she disrespects us." "Did she tell you why I slapped her? Or did you just take her word for it?" Sandra looked down, unable to respond. Harold continued, "She was dressed inappropriately for a party she never mentioned and has been skipping school all week. Did you know that? The principal called me today, but you didn't check the missed calls or texts, did you?" Sandra admitted quietly, "No, I didn't." "At least you admitted that." "But that's not why I slapped her. I did it because she called me a stupid, pathetic excuse of a man and said you both should have left me years ago." Sandra was stunned. "She said that to you?" "Yes. Our daughter said that to my face. This isn't the first time she's disrespected me, and you've always been there to shield her from the consequences. I'm not perfect, but I work hard for this family. I wake up at 4 a.m., work 60 hours a week and handle endless complaints, contracts and clients. Yet I still make time for every school event, every game, and I help with her homework. But when I discipline her for crossing a line, I'm the bad guy. Sandra was speechless, seeing the pain and anger in Harold's eyes as he spoke. He took a deep breath and said, "I'm going for a drive. I need to clear my head." He left. Leaving Sandra stunned in the living room, Harold drove aimlessly, needing to escape. He felt like an ATM or doormat to his family, wondering how things had gone so wrong. Suddenly his phone rang. Expecting it to be Sandra or Rebecca, he saw it was his mother. He answered only to be met with her angry voice. "What in the hell is wrong with you?" "Hi Mom." "Don't hi Mom me. Sandra and Rebecca just called. They said you struck Rebecca and cursed out Sandra. Have you lost your mind?" "No Mom. Just my patience." With that, Harold hung up. Harold loved his mother to a point, but their relationship was strained. Brenda Logan had always been cold, never showing him love or compassion. His father abandoned them when Harold was born, and Brenda made it clear that she believed Harold was no good, just like his father. There was no nurturing bond between them, and she never hesitated to remind him of her low opinion of him. Harold's life changed when his mother met Trevor Jacobs when Harold was 1. Trevor was a beacon of love for both Harold and Brenda. Trevor treated Harold as his own, teaching him life lessons and even defending him when Brenda was too harsh. Although Brenda never showed Harold much love, the misuse eventually stopped and they merely tolerated each other. Trevor loved Harold so much that Harold took his last name. After Brenda and Trevor married, they had a son, Adam, who became the golden child in Brenda's eyes. Adam often used Harold to get out of trouble and took everything from him: friends, allowance, and affection. Only Trevor treated both boys equally, loving and disciplining them fairly. Harold eventually grew distant, speaking mainly to Trevor. When Harold's daughter Rebecca was born, Trevor was the only family member who supported both Harold and Sandra. Adam even tried to flirt with Sandra when Harold wasn't around. But Trevor put a stop to it until his end of life. Trevor's will surprised everyone, splitting $500,000 equally between Harold and Adam when they turned 24. Adam resented Harold for this, feeling entitled to the entire fortune because he was the biological son. Harold used his share to buy a house for his family after leaving the military. Returning to the present, Harold knew he had to go home. After watching the sunset at an old drive-in, he headed back. When he arrived, Sandra was waiting. She apologized for not considering his feelings about Rebecca, and admitted she often sided with their daughter, making Harold look like the bad guy. Harold smiled. "That's all I ask, honey. I love you and Rebecca. You are my world. Just have my back and give me the respect I give you." Sandra responded, "I love you too, Harold." They kissed and Harold pulled out 2 first-class tickets to Jamaica, revealing his surprise anniversary trip. Overjoyed, Sandra jumped into his arms, kissing him non-stop. In the days that followed, things improved in the Jacobs household. Sandra stopped undermining Harold and respected his role as the head of the family. Although Rebecca still wasn't speaking much to Harold, her attitude improved. She stopped skipping school and her grades began to recover. Even Harold's mother eased up on her nagging calls. Harold noticed his brother Adam visiting more often, which seemed to lift Rebecca's spirits. But otherwise things were going well. One day, while cleaning the house before their trip, Harold and Sandra were organizing the garage and attic. Rebecca was upset about being left out of the trip, but kept her feelings to herself after their recent conflict. Harold, working in the attic, came across old photo albums, sparking nostalgia as he looked through childhood photos, wedding pictures, and memories of Rebecca growing up. Just as he was about to put the photos away, he found a plastic bag containing a bundle of letters and a large brown envelope. As he read the contents, his heart sank and his world shattered. The letter Harold found shattered him. "My dearest love, Adam. Last night was magical. I've never felt anything like it. Your touch is like an artist creating a masterpiece, nothing compared to Harold. I just want you in my arms. Yours always, Sandra." Harold was devastated, realizing Sandra loved Adam. I've been married to her for over 20 years and she does this to me, he whispered, his world crumbling. He found more letters from Adam expressing love for Sandra and hinting at their affair, even mentioning that Rebecca had Sandra's eyes. Then Harold discovered a DNA test proving Rebecca wasn't his biological daughter. He felt betrayed and numb, wondering if his entire family knew the truth. Harold decided he needed proof. He took a hair sample from Rebecca's comb for a DNA test, determined to uncover the full truth. He gathered himself, suppressing his rage, and planned his next steps. When he left the attic, he ran into Sandra, who asked where he was going. Harold controlled his anger and calmly lied, saying he needed supplies for the attic and would pick up dinner. Once out of the house, Harold called Marcus Dwight, a trusted private investigator who worked for his company. Marcus was a former police officer who had left the force after a near-fatal ambush, dedicating his skills to private investigations instead. When Harold arrived at the office, Marcus immediately sensed something was wrong. Harold broke down, explaining everything. Marcus, who had a personal connection to a similar situation, was furious. He remembered a friend who had discovered his daughter wasn't his and lost everything in the fallout, leading to a tragic courtroom incident. Seeing Harold in such pain brought back those memories, and Marcus took the situation personally, determined to help Harold get to the bottom of it. Harold, wiping his tears, stood up. "First, I need to confirm if Rebecca is my daughter." He pulled out a bag with her hair. "Depending on the results, we'll decide what to do next. Second, I want to destroy them, not illegally, but in a way that makes them feel the pain and humiliation I'm experiencing." Marcus smiled. "Let's get to work." He showed Harold a room full of surveillance equipment. "This is all legal, as long as it's used on your property or devices in your name. I'll need your permission to install everything." Harold agreed, signing the paperwork. "I'll get the cameras in place when no one else is home. You don't need to know where they are, just trust me, they'll capture everything." "I respect what you do, Harold, and I understand your pain." Feeling supported, Harold nodded. Marcus also gave him the address of a DNA testing lab nearby, suggesting he could drop off the sample that day. Determined, Harold agreed. "Let's get this started." After leaving Marcus' office, Harold called his lawyer and best friend, Charles Darwin. "Charles, I need to see you. Something serious has happened." "Meet me at my office in an hour," Charles replied. When Harold arrived, Charles was shocked by his friend's appearance. "What happened, Harold? Is Sandra and Rebecca okay?" Harold broke down, recounting the day's events. Charles was furious on Harold's behalf. "They won't get away with this. Legally, you can monitor anything on your property or devices in your name. We'll access any deleted files and use everything you've gathered. The law is on your side if we prove infidelity, especially with the new state laws protecting the assets of the cheated party." Seeing his friend's despair, Charles added, "I can't imagine what you're going through, but you need to protect yourself now." Harold, heartbroken, said, "I loved her for over 17 years, and now it all means nothing. My own daughter, who might not even be mine, despises me, and my wife cheated with my brother, who hates me just for existing." Charles, moved by Harold's pain, assured him, "We'll set things right. You stood by me when I needed help, and I'll do the same for you." The two friends embraced. As Harold drove home with the supplies, he reflected on the betrayal and pain he endured that day. He was determined to keep his knowledge of the affair hidden until he had all the facts. The thought of Rebecca not being his daughter tormented him, but he braced himself for the DNA results, dreading what they might reveal. When Harold arrived home, everything seemed normal, despite his contempt. He kissed his wife to avoid raising suspicion. They finished cleaning the house and had dinner together, but Harold felt like he was living in a sitcom, surrounded by actors instead of his real family. Later that night, after everyone was asleep, Harold installed the hacking equipment on Sandra's and Rebecca's phones, following Marcus's instructions. He texted Marcus to confirm it was done, and within minutes Marcus responded, indicating the hacking had begun. By the end of the week, Harold would have the information he needed, whether he wanted it or not. The next day, after Rebecca went to school and Sandra to work, Harold decided he needed a new outlet. He couldn't just sit around feeling broken. Remembering his childhood love of comic books, he searched for a comic book shop and found one called the Mischievous Pin. Stepping inside, memories of his childhood flooded back, days spent with a friend, escaping life's troubles through comics and anime. That friend, however, had been lost to him for years, bringing a wave of sadness. At the cashier, Harold was stunned to see someone he never expected, Rose. Her eyes widened with recognition, and she greeted him with a huge smile. "Harold! It's been ages." She hugged him tightly. It was the first time Harold had genuinely smiled since his ordeal began. Rose had come into Harold's life when he was a child, during a tough time. On a parents' day when his mother dismissed him harshly, he had run off to cry under a tree. Rose, a girl with red hair and blue eyes, approached him, offering kindness and inviting him to join her family's picnic. That simple gesture sparked a deep friendship that grew into love by the time they were in high school. However, Harold's brother Adam, who had a history of taking things from Harold, wanted Rose for himself. When she rejected Adam's advances and defended herself against him, it led to a series of events that forced Rose and her family to move away to avoid legal trouble. Rose had apologized for the chaos, but Harold had reassured her that she had done nothing wrong, blaming himself instead. In the park where they first met, they had held each other, expressing their love, even though life had torn them apart. Seeing Rose again brought back all those memories for Harold, reminding him of a simpler, happier time. Harold and Rose had always planned to wait until they were 18 at prom, for their first time together to make it special. Over the years, their love and friendship grew stronger. But when the day of Rose's move came, it felt like a part of them died. Harold, driven by Trevor, gave Rose one last hug before watching her leave, knowing they might never see each other again. As the years passed, Harold met and married Sandra, building a family with her. Now, after all these years, he found himself reunited with Rose. "Harold, I can't believe it's been so long," Rose said, tears in her eyes. Despite the years, she had grown into a beautiful woman, looking youthful at 33. With her short red hair, blue eyes, and geeky tattoos, she still carried the charm that had captivated Harold. "Rose, you look amazing," Harold replied, making her blush. They decided to catch up during Rose's break, heading to a cozy break room in the comic shop she owned. Harold was surprised and impressed. "You own this place? How did that happen?" Rose explained that after her parents died in a car accident, she discovered they had a life insurance policy and a trust from her grandparents, totaling $2 million. With her love for comics and a business background, she returned to town, bought the property, and turned it into her dream comic shop, living on the top floor. Harold was proud of her success. "You deserve this, Rose. I bet your guy is the luckiest in the world." Rose's smile faded. "He's out of the picture. I caught him cheating, and he even had the nerve to be angry when I interrupted him. Thankfully, we didn't have kids and I got out before things got worse." Harold, relating to her pain, shared what had happened to him recently. Rose hugged him tightly. "I'm here for you, whatever happens." Harold felt a warmth he hadn't experienced in a long time. As they parted, Rose invited him to visit again. "I'd like that," Harold said before driving off. On his way home, Harold received a text from Marcus. "Meet me at Charles's." Harold knew what this meant and, despite dreading what was to come, headed there. Upon arrival, Charles's wife, Linda, greeted him warmly. "Harold, I'm so sorry about everything. We're here for you no matter what." Harold hugged Linda and thanked her before heading into the office, where Marcus and Charles awaited him with grim expressions. Marcus began, "Harold, I'm sorry, but it's bad. We found more texts and videos. They've been having an on-and-off affair since Rebecca was born. And there's more. The DNA test confirmed you're not Rebecca's father." Harold, overwhelmed with pain and humiliation, broke down. Marcus offered him a sip from his flask to steady him, then continued, "We also discovered that your mother and Rebecca knew about the affair since Rebecca was 12, around the time you noticed a change." Harold's heart broke as he read the documents. Chats between Rebecca and his mother expressing their hatred for him, their enjoyment of living off him, and plans to divorce him after Rebecca graduated. They even discussed moving Adam into the house Harold paid for, and how his mother wished he had died instead of Trevor. In shock, Harold muttered, "How could my own family hate me so much?" Charles and Linda offered comfort, with Linda reminding him, "Family isn't about blood. It's about actions. You saved Charles and me years ago, and you've been our family ever since. We love you and will always be here for you. Harold, resolved, told Charles, we go scorched earth. Charles nodded. How do you want the paperwork sent? Harold decided, I'll deliver it to Sandra myself. She's expecting a surprise, and she'll get one when she and Rebecca come home. I used to love my daughter, but now I can't even stand to hear her name. Charles agreed, asking about Adam. I want him to get some bad news while he's at work, Harold replied. Charles smiled at the plan. Consider it done. Harold then added, I want something special for my mother. I'll deliver the divorce papers myself during Rebecca's party in front of everyone. I want them all to see that Adam isn't the golden child they thought he was. Charles, initially surprised, supported the idea. I'm on board. Harold maintained his composure, planning to keep up appearances until their anniversary trip. I'll confront Sandra then and decide what to do after. Everyone agreed, and Linda reminded him, we love you and are here for you. On the day of the trip, Harold maintained the facade. The night before, Sandra initiated closeness, and Harold responded with aggression, treating her without affection. Afterward, Sandra, satisfied but shocked, asked, what's gotten into you? Harold coldly replied, just something I needed to get out of my system. As they prepared to leave, Adam and their mother Janet arrived. Adam smirked, making a comment about Rebecca that nearly drove Harold to violence, especially when Adam hugged Sandra inappropriately. Harold restrained himself, knowing he needed to keep the element of surprise. He avoided his mother, knowing any interaction might raise suspicion. After loading the Camaro, they headed to the airport. As Harold gazed out at the island below, hearing the captain announce their landing, he thought about how he would confront Sandra and whether she would be honest with him. He planned to maintain the facade of a loving husband until then, hoping she would at least tell him the truth. The resort, called the Hidden Treasure, was stunning, with beautiful views, luxurious amenities, and perfect settings for couples. Knowing this trip marked the end of his marriage, Harold decided to make the most of it. He and Sandra enjoyed their time, exploring trails, beaches, and nightclubs. On the second night, Sandra seemed happier than ever, and though Harold didn't love her anymore, he decided to be with her one last time. He used her for his own pleasure, feeling nothing, and resolved that it would be the last time. The next morning, Harold woke up and gently nudged Sandra awake. They cleaned up and went to breakfast. As they ate, Sandra said, Harold, this trip has been amazing. I love you, and when we get home, things will be different. Harold calmly responded, Sandra, on that we agree. He then pulled out a bundle from a Ziploc bag and placed it on the table. Sandra's face turned white. Where did you find these? In the attic, the day after you said you loved me, Harold replied. Sandra, realizing her nearly 20-year marriage was falling apart, began to cry. I can explain. It was a mistake. Harold laughed bitterly. A mistake? Forgetting something at home is a mistake. Cheating and having your husband raise another man's child is a choice. At least own up to it. Through her tears, Sandra explained, it started a year after we began dating. We had an argument and I was upset. Adam came over, comforted me, and we ended up having sex. It was supposed to be just once, but it continued on and off for years. I never meant to hurt you, Harold. I love you. No, don't say that. You lost the right to use that word with me. Love requires loyalty and respect, which you clearly lack. Sandra cried harder, knowing she deserved his anger. Harold continued, I saw the DNA test. I know Rebecca isn't mine. Sandra gasped and Harold continued, his voice harsh, so not only did you betray me with my brother, but you made me raise his child who treated me like dirt. Who is her father? Harold already knew the answer, but wanted to see if Sandra had any dignity left to be honest with him. Despite everything, a part of him still loved her, but he couldn't stay in a marriage built on lies. Harold asked, his voice cold and demanding, what is his name, Sandra? Sandra hesitated before replying, I can't tell you. I'm sorry. Harold didn't respond, just stared at her with a blank expression. He put money down for their drinks, canceled the meal and walked away without a word. Sandra ran after him, but he ignored her. Back at the hotel, Harold started packing without speaking to her. Realizing he was done with her, Sandra packed as well. Harold caught an earlier flight, leaving Sandra to arrive home 2 hours later. When Harold got home, he found Adam waiting with a smug grin. Before Adam could speak, Harold confronted him. "I know everything about you and Sandra. Get out of my house before I smash your face into my coffee table." Terrified, Adam left immediately. Harold then moved his belongings from the master bedroom to the basement, which he had previously set up as a guest apartment. Sandra watched, realizing too late that her actions had likely ended their marriage. The next day, Harold met with Marcus, Charles and Linda to discuss the trip and his next steps. He instructed them to prepare everything for Rebecca's 18th birthday party at the Grand Lion Hotel. Marcus would serve as Harold's personal security that night. Marcus revealed more dirt on Adam, including sexual maltreatment claims and shady business practices. He assured Harold that the women were ready to testify against Adam. Impressed, Harold suggested a promotion for Marcus, which brought some lightness to the meeting. But as Harold left, his resolve hardened. He was done shedding tears. Now he had a purpose. Knowing Rebecca was out with his mother and Adam, Harold waited for their return, sitting in the living room with a glass of brandy. When Rebecca arrived, she sneered. "Finally, I can leave that loser in this dump." Sandra tried to correct her. "That loser loves you and raised you. Show some respect." Rebecca rolled her eyes and replied, "Oh please. You've been with my real dad since I was born. It's too late for respect. That loser kept me from Ronnie and I hate him for it." From the shadows, Harold spoke up. "Rebecca, why don't you tell me how you really feel?" Both women froze in terror as they realized Harold had heard everything. Rebecca shrank, realizing her cruel words had been overheard by the very man she had just insulted. "Harold, it's not what you think," Sandra tried to explain. "She just misspoke." "No, she said exactly what she meant," Harold replied, stepping closer. The women huddled together as he continued. "I know everything, Sandra. I know Rebecca isn't my daughter but Adam's. I know my mother knew about the affair since Rebecca was 12. You told Rebecca I was having an affair and that Adam was comforting you, all to cover up your own shame." Harold turned to Rebecca. "I don't know what I did to make you hate me, Rebecca. I loved you with all my heart. I was there for you when Tommy broke up with you, when you were sick, when you started school. I promised to protect you and show you love, unlike what I experienced from my mother." Rebecca began to cry as he continued. "When you were in that car accident, all I cared about was getting to you, hoping you weren't hurt." Harold then looked at Sandra. "And you, my love, did you and Adam laugh every time you took him to our bed?" Sandra went pale. "Before you ask, I have video evidence," Harold said, turning on the TV to show footage of Sandra and Adam together in their marital bed. "You spied on me?" Sandra asked, irritated. "Are you seriously upset that I recorded you cheating in our bed?" Harold shot back. Sandra stammered. "I can explain. We can work through this." "Oh God, no." Harold cut her off. "This wasn't a mistake, Sandra. It was a choice over and over again. You slept with my brother, had his child, and made me raise her as mine." Rebecca flinched at Harold's cold words. Harold finished his drink, washed the glass, and reflected on how his marriage was going down the drain. As he put on his jacket and headed for the door, Sandra yelled, "Where are you going? We need to talk. This is a family." Harold scoffed. "What family? Did you not hear what I just said? I'm leaving because I can't stand the sight of either of you." He slammed the door and drove off, needing to escape. At 10 p.m. he didn't want to go to a bar. He wanted to be with a friend. He knew just where to go. Rose was at home with her 2 new German Shepherd puppies, Lady and Gunter. She had always wanted to be a mother, but bad relationships had left her alone. These puppies were now her companions. When she heard her buzzer, she saw Harold on the door camera and let him in. When Harold arrived, he was heartbroken. Without saying a word, he held on to Rose and cried, finally releasing all the pain and anguish he had been holding in.